Hello, guys. What is going on? Welcome back to No Cap. It is now episode 4 of the podcast where we talk all things Valorant. I interview somebody and we break things down. It's been a little bit, got a little break going, a little longer than intended, a little longer than wanted, but I'm really thrilled to get back into the swing of things with Doug here as my guest. This is EsportsDoug. I'm sure everybody recognizes his wonderful, handsome face. Uh, really a caster that has been a big part of this game scene since early on, and was commentating Iceland. Just a great friendly face to have in Valorant. How you doing, Doug?
I'm good, dude. Thank you so much for having me. I've been a longtime fan of your show. And just chatting with you in general. It's just always something like when it comes to picking your brain, how many times have I DM'd you and been like, hey, dude, help me think through this? Or like, why would teams do this? Or what about this? It's always so rich to like pick your brain on some of this stuff. So I'm super excited to be on the show. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, Doug and I go way back, as in like 3 or 4 months, when I got to come on a watch party that you did, and yeah, it was a ton of fun. And I very quickly realized that you are a caster who's done, in my opinion, an exemplary job, really setting the bar for
Thank you.
learning the game, being analytical about the game, kind of embracing being a student of the game as much as possible,
Thank
not
you.
just the minimum requirements, whatever those are. Um, and yeah, so here we are. We just finished Iceland. We're recording. It's been a little bit. It's been like almost two
Couple weeks.
weeks,
Yeah.
but I think it's still recent enough that we could start with a chat. What do you think? How do you think it went?
I think by and large, Reykjavik went as predicted with a couple of exceptions, right? Like we went into the tournament, everyone knew Sentinels was the best. I think the question really was, is there anybody who can hang with Sentinels? And a lot of people, when you look down the list of teams participating, they had an asterisk by Fnatic. They had maybe less of an asterisk, but there was an asterisk by Liquid as well as a team that could hang, a team that can compete. Um, and I think we saw that, right? Like Sentinels, when they're on, it really just seems like they're head and shoulders above everybody. They took the best that Fnatic could throw at them, and every map was a banger, but it was still a sweep, right? So overall, I think you kind of take a step back. The event was incredible for a first international land. You got to think like, dude, we did that with production teams in Iceland, production teams in LA. We had talent in different continents, a number of different time zones. Who knows how many time zones we crossed over? To do that over 6 days was just, it was a blast. It was an awesome way to set the bar for the future.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Um, it was just so fun to have the first land to silence all the NA haters. Personally, for me, and show
That's what I'm
what the
talking
better
about,
region is, right? Um, but it's kind of fun that you're right. It was like it's this grand finals that was 3-0, it was a sweep, but
Yeah.
they were like two of them went to OT and one almost
Yeah.
went to OT.
Yep.
I was shocked it didn't go to OT. Um,
Hmm.
I really enjoy that because there was like such a debate about like, oh, what region's going to be better,
Hmm.
and who's the champions, which region has the game most figured out. And I think Sentinels looked incredible, and it was a nice 3-0. But like, if anyone wants to spin the story that it was really close, and it kind of was. Who did Sentinels play bad? Did Fnatic play good? It was so, these games were 3-0, but almost could have been 3-0 the other direction. Like it's
Easily.
such a perfect setup for like exiting and then leading into Berlin. Like
Yep.
it's easy for somebody to try to make an argument that you just don't know. It wasn't a total stomp. It didn't just. There's still stories to be had.
There are. I do think it's kind of sobering. I think I tweeted this out earlier this week, right? Like dude, it's easy to forget. Oh, you're good. It's easy to forget that Sentinels didn't drop a single map. Like
Yeah.
not one. And it was only Fnatic who pushed them.
Mhm.
And they got pushed by Fnatic every time, really. But it was only Fnatic that pushed them. So there is this interesting balance between Sentinels won. They won in a very impressive fashion. They are currently like undisputed the best. But yeah, what does that look like going into Berlin? Right?
Yeah.
Like, is there a gap? How big is that gap perceived from the people's perspectives? And how are those storylines going to build? I think another thing we have to consider is there's still like qualifiers, right?
Yeah.
Berlin also has more teams, more
Mhm.
representation. It's just it's so good. I can't wait.
Yeah. No, it's not only does it have more teams, but it's quite possible that a lot of these teams that were in Iceland just aren't there in
Yeah.
Berlin. And that's what's crazy is like, oh, what's the storyline going to be? Like, which team's going to get their revenge? It might just look completely different. You never
And
know. These qualifiers are wild.
and I think part of that's kind of like a shame in the sense that I can explain. So a team that really impressed me was Newturn, right?
Mhm.
And when you Newturn was I guess yeah, I guess I feel comfortable calling them a dark horse going into the tournament. As somebody who could have a really good deep run into the tournament, I think um, they were on a pretty favorable half of the bracket. The only team that they really needed to get past was Liquid, in my opinion, and we didn't know what Liquid we were going to get.
Mhm.
So there was a very real world where they placed top three, where they were, potentially even top two. And I think the other thing that really impressed me about Newturn was, dude, they did that. They had the run that they did, which was Sharks version one, um, and then they lost to Sentinels and Fnatic, which if you're going to lose to anyone, lose to them.
Yep.
But they did that with very clearly exposed weaknesses, right?
Mhm.
Like everyone and their mom knows they can't play Haven at this point.
Yeah.
Everyone and their mom knows that their Icebox is even worse, because if you're intentionally banning out Icebox and you have to play Haven and you're that bad at Haven, your
Mhm.
Icebox has to be it's got to be horrendous, right?
Yeah.
And they had that deep of a run. They were that competitive against top teams from EMEA and North America, with those glaring things exposed for everyone to pick on.
Yeah.
That's super impressive.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think it'll be. You're right. They had very glaring known weaknesses, and I think that's something that's going to be so interesting. Is by the time Berlin happens in September, are we gonna? Is there gonna be enough footage of the
Yeah.
Valorant? Like, what's gonna? Oh, well, first of all, we're gonna get a major patch in 10 days. There's gonna be a new agent. I assume there's gonna be a fair chunk of buffs and nerfs.
Yeah.
What are a team's weakness? I mean, there's going to be a new map. Breeze will be in Berlin, and it wasn't in Iceland. It's going to
Yep.
be so hard to tell, or maybe it won't. Maybe all the way till September. Maybe that's enough time. But uh, it's scary to think kind of what will the meta be? Which teams will have
Hmm.
kind of the pulse on it? What will teams map? Teams could just flip their map
Yeah.
pool between now and Berlin. Even
Hmm.
teams that were in Iceland. Um, it's gonna get wild. I think that this was probably kind of a wake-up call for teams of like, okay, we got to widen our map pool. We got to be more unpredictable coming into Iceland. I think it was the first tournament that was international. It was a LAN, and I think I admire every region seemed to come in with confidence in their region. There was
Hmm.
not a single
Hmm.
team that came to Iceland and like switched from Omen to Astra and ran some really different stuff from what got them to Iceland. Every team was like, "Yep, we're gonna play the comps we played in the regionals, and we're gonna, you know, we think we know what it takes." I wonder, does what happened in Iceland shake up a region's, a team's confidence in their own region? Maybe. Do you think maybe the teams from Brazil that qualify will look and say, okay, wait, hang on, what's North America and Europe been doing? We got to prepare for Berlin. Wait, they're playing these agents. They're the best. That's the meta. We got to switch before Berlin. I mean, it's hard to predict, but
I think they have to,
yeah.
right? And I normally don't like doing this, but um, as we'll see, there are very clear parallels into where I'm going here. But so League of Legends, the Worlds tournament in October every year, 3 weeks or a month long, however long it is. Throughout the tournament, and mind you, this is in a much more compressed timeline. So, in the tournament, it doesn't quite apply. But when you think about how you prepare for Berlin, and then even during Berlin, some of this certainly can translate. For Worlds, for League, throughout the tournament, there comes a point at which the 16 teams that are participating, or however many are left, get to that time where they realize, okay, there is one clearly defined better way to play the game than everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
Right. And it normally is brought in by a region, right? And then you see all these other teams start to scramble because they realize, okay, what it took us to get here is not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think we saw that with everyone that refused to play Viper and everyone that refused to play Omen, or excuse me, Astra, who was still stuck in the Omen meta. That like Omen was great when Omen was not rivaled, right? But then Astra comes out, and in a lot of ways, Astra can do things that Omen never could. If you are not adapting, if you're not evolving, you will die.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we saw a lot of. And to kind of wrap back to the example, going into a large international tournament, a 10-day international tournament, right? It's going to be longer in Berlin, more teams, possibly. I would hope I would presume a different format, so maybe even more games. Like you have to adapt. You have to be able to do so on the fly, because as we saw for the teams that, like you said, while it was admirable that they came in confident in their compositions and in how they approach the game, it was not the best. It was not the most optimal, and it wasn't good enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think talking about, the specific case of Iceland, I definitely don't want to undermine that. I think Sentinels is the best team. I think they looked like an incredible team, regardless of meta or comps or anything. I just think they looked, I felt confident that they would be the best, but I was rooting for North America first because I'm a North American Valorant coach, but
USA, baby.
But right on the toes of my desire for North America to win was my desire for Astra teams to win. And that's not because I particularly love the agent or the design, but because I have been, I have personally suffered a tournament loss playing Omen against Astra. I know what that agent does, and I think she's ridiculous. And I more even than wanting the attention so that Riot will change, I can't handle. It's like a personal. I feel it in my body when I watch a team attempt to play Omen or Brim, and when I see tweets of people praising them for it, I need the Astra team to win. There was a lot in it for me. There's a lot of emotional investment around that.
The more I think about this, when you think about Astra and how strong we knew she was well before Iceland, like we knew, right? In North America, we knew.
Yeah.
And you could make the same argument for maps like Icebox, right? Nobody liked playing Icebox at the beginning, right? That wasn't right? Like it sucked for everybody, all right? It was like equal degrees of suck across the board. But there was enough time to learn. There was enough time to adapt. And I think the scary thing is you can say this with Astra, you can say this with Icebox, excuse me. There was enough time to adapt. There was enough time to learn. There was enough time to do what you had to and make the changes that you had to shore up those weaknesses. And some teams just didn't.
Yeah. Yep. And I think part of that is that you're totally right. There was plenty of time to adapt, and I think there was information to work with when you think about adapting. You had time to try different things in scrims and do your own analysis of agents, but you could watch North American very far into the qualifier tournament games where a team running Omen played a team running Astra. And, okay, should we run Omen or should we run Astra? That was a big question teams had to answer going into Iceland and preparing for it. And that's, at the end of the day, that's only one question, and you just have to watch teams play, an Omen team play an Astra team and try to evaluate for yourself which one's better. I think it will get really challenging as Riot adds more agents and presumably just buffs and nerfs more agents per patch, right? I'm just making that assumption logically that when this game has 30 agents, there's going to be more buffs and nerfs to agents per meta shift. it's going to get a lot harder because there's not only one question, and there's not always going to be a direct comparison of this agent versus this agent in tourney games to watch. It will get really hard for teams I think it will get harder to find the answer to what's the meta before the big tournament, before the Masters land. And I'm curious. I think it might be more volatile or more shakeups in the future between regions. It'll be a little harder to predict. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think so. When I walk away from Iceland, and even kind of some leading into Iceland, in my opinion, one of the leading factors when I look at regions and when I look at teams, and I use this as like a predictability scale on how they may perform, it's how adaptable are you? How much adaptability has been seen in your DNA? Take version 1 as an example, right? Like, I know I've said this on camera a couple times. When the Bucky meta was the thing,
Yeah.
they exploited that, right? Top to bottom.
Mm-hmm.
When Viper became prevalent, they exploited that. They exploited Astra. So you start to see a team that's built around the possibility and that has the DNA to be able to adapt and to be able to shift, right? And not just get so stuck in, no, this is how we play the game,
Right.
right? Like,
right.
the fundamentals have to be there, right? So I hope nobody's hearing me say, like, fundamentals are bad, throw fundamentals out the window, because there are still fundamentals to the game, right? It's a tactical FPS.
Yeah.
But beyond that, as things evolve, like you're saying, new agents, new maps, buffs, nerfs, everything that's going to be involved, and like how things are going to get tweaked and weapons, what have you, like, if you don't have that wiggle room that's
Right.
built into
Right.
how you think about the game, you're in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. I think a unique challenge for teams will be how do they kind of keep that flexibility? What are they willing to try? What are they willing to adapt with?
Mhm.
I think, a lot of it will be teams will make a point, I think, after Iceland to keep things more private. I think teams will really want to hide some certain looks so that teams have a really hard time adapting. I think every team let each other do their homework. I think it's going to be much different come Berlin, but we'll see. We'll find out. Anyway, I mean, clearly, Doug, you know Valorant very well, and I do want to hear more of your thoughts on Valorant, but I also want to hear about you. I mean, it's impressive to me. I think, I have to learn this stuff. I have to watch this stuff because I have to coach a team. I mean, you have to do it because I assume you do it because you enjoy it. I assume you study Valorant because you enjoy it, but also because you're a caster and you have to present information in the right way to viewers. And I'm curious, I just want to hear about you and your journey into Valorant. When would you say you really got into casting Valorant? Was it like right away, or did you take a few months to kind of start?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I first heard Valorant came out, or was coming out, excuse me, I'll be very honest with you. My initial thought to it at that point, I was doing a little bit of talent work with League of Legends and like the collegiate, semi-pro, like amateur, like tier 3, I guess is probably where that would go, space. And I loved casting League. I really did. And I'm sure we'll come back to this, but the reason that I loved doing it as much as I did was because I studied the game and I loved being a nerd about the game, right? Like, I love it. It to me, League was so attractive because it was a chess match, in my opinion, right? Like, and I could nerd out about these little things on how the map is played in macro and it kind of everything that comes along with that and the decisions that follow. But Valorant came out, and my first thought was, I'm super excited about this, and then I instantly thought, hold the phone, Douglas. Riot's coming out with a title. Number 1, it's Riot. Number 2, it's a title that's intended to rival one of the most popular esports in the world right now in CS. Every top tier talent is going to be swarming to work on this game. What on earth makes you think that you're going to get through that Wild West cluster of talent and somehow walk away from that unscathed.
Yeah.
So honestly, I was like, I'm not even like, dude, what's the point? Right? Like, don't even
Right.
bother. Then the beta was released, and I happened to get a drop on the very first day. And I was super pumped about it. I'm like, dope. I've never played a tac shooter. This is going to be brutal. I'm going to suck. Um, but I have, for whatever reason, I took that opportunity and I said, okay, I'm going to reach out to influencer friends that I have. And I'm going to organize and I'm going to cast my own tournament. And it was for kicks and giggles, right? And I ended out reaching out to 8 friends. They built teams. I solo casted, produced the whole thing. And it was a blast. It was so much fun. Um, and that was the beginning, right? That's when it was still in beta. I casted it for the first time, and I'm like, oh, dog, this is fun. Like
Yeah.
I could do this. And it evolved from there, right? Like, I wanted to cast more, and I was getting some opportunities, not very many. Um, and then in very Doug fashion, I decided one day, I looked at myself and I said, well, listen, if nobody's going to call you to let you in, right?
Yeah.
If you're knocking and no one's going to open the door, you rip the damn wall down
Yeah.
and go.
Totally.
Right. So I ended out organizing a charity event. It was like a $10,000 charity tournament where we invited Gen G played in it, Cloud9 played in it, Time In, or I don't remember if they were called Time In at that time, but Ninja's team and a couple of other teams competed in it. And the intent was, I'm going to organize my own tournament and I'm going to cast it. Right. Like,
Yeah.
I want to do this. I have foolishly decided that I'm going to do this dang thing and I'm going to give this bad boy everything I've got. And it was through stuff like that where I just decided, dude, like, brute force your way in there. If you have to, make your own opportunities, do what you need to do it. Because at the end of the day, like, it's harsh, but it's true. Like, nobody's going to do it for you.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you have to do it yourself if you want it. And that turned into more opportunities where I got like the FaZe Clan Invitational.
Yeah.
I got to cast that, and then through, I think that was, I don't remember. I may have had one more Ignition series. And then VCT happened, and it's been such a humbling experience, dude. Like, never in a million years would I have imagined this. And the funny thing is, I dreamed about it a lot.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I would daydream about it. I would wonder what it would be like. Like, I remember seeing an international talent announcement for MSI, another league tournament. And I remember looking at it and thinking, dude, what would it be like to be on that talent announcement?
Yeah.
Right. Like, I would just like daydream about this stuff. And I'm living it now.
Yeah. Yeah, you are. You are living it. You did break that wall down, and here you are. You're living it. It's an incredible feeling, I bet.
It's surreal. Yeah, it's super surreal. I think this idea of like imposter syndrome is very much a real thing, right? Because like I look around at the talent that I'm working with and I'm like, dude, how did you even get here?
Yeah.
Right? Like, look at the talent. You're talking about world-class talent, the best to ever do it. And some of the best, like, for generations to come. Right? So it's super humbling. It's such a sobering experience. And I think I don't say that in like a pretentious way. It really is. It's healthy for me because that keeps me hungry, right? Like, there's just like a sober reality to it that I need to work 2 times, 3 times as hard.
Yeah.
And that's okay because I love the game, but I've got to put the legwork in.
Yeah. Totally. I think it's a lot of legwork, and it doesn't come off pretentious at all. I mean, it's a really competitive scene. for casters, for players, for coaches, right? I mean, how many casters are really, how many spots are there for casters in Valorant? And at the top level, how many spots for North American coaches are there? How many, it's all very, very, very competitive. And I think an incredible thing I've learned in a year with Valorant, a little more than a year now, is something I really loved. I remember early on casters kind of hosting tournaments basically, and I'd play in them, and I remember kind of feeling like, do they really have any idea what they're saying? Like, let me open this because this game's been out for 2 weeks. And I remember playing in a tournament that Ask Joshy had casted, and I was like, he doesn't really know much of what he's talking about. But then I looked back and watched the VOD, and I was like, I found it on his channel. The players, we didn't know what we were doing either. Nobody knew what they were doing. I mean, it was just nonsense. We were all figuring the game out, and I can really relate to feeling coming into this. It's scary because I knew that from family and friends' experiences with esports that breaking through in a new game is really important. It's really easy to do relative to trying to break through in Counter-Strike at this point.
Right.
I mean,
impossible.
the point right before Valorant came out, let's say in North America, I mean, it's a 20-year-old game. How are you going to do it? You're going to smash Melee. You're going to become a Smash Melee pro. Good luck. You got 20 years of catch-up to do. Yeah. And I think there's a real fear coming into a new esports. It can feel like the only opportunity really to break through, but it gets really harder and harder every year because esports now isn't what esports was 10 years ago. When a game came out 10 years ago, even when Overwatch first came out, people don't really switch on to new esports right away. They didn't jump right in. I think especially after something like Fortnite's success, Valorant was coming out, and it sucked because I knew I felt like if Valorant was 7 years ago and I wanted to all in on it and believe in its success, I was pretty much guaranteed to have a spot somewhere professionally in the esport if I get on the ground floor. But 2020 Valorant, it's kind of felt like the first esport where there's thousands and thousands of other people that are thinking the exact same thing. And it's like you said, it's a Riot game that's attempting to compete with Counter-Strike, one of the most successful 3 or 4 esports. It's you're not exactly ahead of the curve by trying to make that day one beta drop worthwhile. And it's like a really intense feeling, and I can relate to it a lot. And even breaking down walls, right? I mean, I didn't have any real connections to get. I ended up playing on a team that was, my brother played Overwatch, and his old teammates were making a team, and I played with them. That was my connection, and I got cut from that team. And then I was like, oh shit, like, what am I gonna do? But I did, like you hosted a charity tournament. I said, fuck it, I'm just gonna build my own team, then just try to make it work. And it's a ton of legwork. You don't get to hit the brakes, and you mentioned imposter syndrome, and I think it's a really, really easy thing to feel if you're somebody who made it in the current esport that you're in, and it's such a young esport, right? I mean, if it's probably easy to avoid the feeling. Maybe it's not if you have a huge background in other games, but when you've made it in Valorant, it's only been about 13 months since beta started, and 13 or 14 months, it's hard not to feel imposter syndrome because it's really hard to have any time to hit the brakes and stop doing the legwork and look back at what you've done. Like, it feels like it's weird to me. It is surreal to look back and be like, I kind of accomplished what I set out to accomplish. But until I sat down and looked at that, I haven't felt that yet. I mean, it's just, it's like you're always at the edge of the treadmill. It's really hard.
I've said this before. I am horrible at celebrating my own successes in general, and I think to your point, with it being as demanding as it is hard to slow down, and it is hard to like stop and think like, dude, you've done these things, right? Like, you've accomplished these things. And I think one of the things for me, early on, again, I wasn't, and I still don't think I am, but I was a nobody, right? Like nobody knew who I was. I didn't have this. I mean, I had an esports background, but certainly not in the talent space. So
Right.
I think it was just really interesting. And I know you and I have had conversations about this early on. I felt this maybe pressure is not the right word because I did genuinely and I still do genuinely enjoy doing it. So it's not like it's a big deal, but I felt this need for two reasons. Number one, again, I wasn't known. And then number two, there's this perception that play-by-play casters don't know anything.
Yeah.
So I felt this need or this pressure, or whatever you want to call it, or maybe better said, I decided to break that mold. And I knew that in order for me to do that, I had to, like you said, it may have been a new title, but I was making up decades
Yeah.
of CS knowledge,
Hmm.
of tactical shooter experience. So I was like, you have to study the game and you have to understand it. You have to know it. You have to be able to communicate it in a way that's succinct, but in a way that's equally as deep and as complex as anybody else can do it.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, and this is going to be a generalization. Okay,
Yeah.
anybody can yell into a microphone, right? Like that's
Hmm.
not impressive.
Yeah.
Anybody can do that. I think talent sets themselves apart, or at least I chose to set myself apart by striving to deeply understand and study the game in a way that could accurately convey moments with my color caster. And the thing is, and I think we'll talk about this a bit more later, but in my opinion, the game requires that.
Hmm.
Valorant is unique from other round-based tech shooters, and I think again we can talk more about this because I can talk about this for a long time. Um, Valorant requires that. So I looked at that and I said, okay, nobody knows who I am. Everybody's going to see that I'm a play caster, and they're going to go, all right, we don't know this guy. All he does is yell on a microphone. He doesn't know anything. This guy, like, blow him off, right? He doesn't know
Right.
anything. And I decided, f that.
Hmm.
I'm going. I'm gonna understand this game just as well as anyone else.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you've really succeeded there. I think, you identified, you took something that people see as a weakness, of people in your
Mhm.
role, and you really just honed in and tunnel visioned on building that up, right? Exactly. Like, out of anybody, other than a host at an event, what's the person who might be, involved
Mhm.
as you've got a host, and then probably the play-by-play casters, and then you've got analysts and players and coaches and so on, right? And I think
Mhm.
something that I really like about your casting is maybe not anybody, like you said, it's a generalization, can yell into a microphone, but you can. I'm just guessing. I'm speaking on a career that's not mine, but for a caster, they can
Sure.
choose how to invest their time into developing their ability to yell, their casting, and so on, or being a student of the game. And something that listening to what you're saying about how much you prioritize studying the game, something that I want to say without overstepping, something I really like about your casting is it seems very genuine when you do get excited to me. And I think that's
Thank you.
because for anyone who studies the game, plays the game, just puts a lot of time into Valorant, you really know what makes you feel excited, what's really impressive, rare, hard to see, and what really is like professional players get a lot of back-to-back 1Ds with their sheriff, like
Right.
two in a row. Like, okay, I'm just picking a random example, but
Sure.
hitting a couple nice 1Ds with a sheriff, I mean, it's exciting, but it's something that's expected. When I see
Right.
a play-by-play caster really yell and get excited about something that I don't feel is exciting, I personally feel, oh man, like they're just kind of yelling to yell. Like this doesn't. It kind of off puts me. It distracts me. But
Mhm.
when I feel like I'm with the play-by-play caster, you're really getting excited, getting pumped about the same things that I'm subconsciously getting excited about. It's a much more enjoyable experience. And I think
Yeah.
I think it's clearly something that really ties into the amount of time you put, I imagine, into studying this game.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's interesting is how you bridge that gap. So you're a professional Valorant coach, right? You understand this game better than 90% of the people who play it, who watch it, probably like 98% actually.
Thanks.
Than the people who watch it, who like play it. Well, it's your job,
Yeah,
right?
no, it
Like
is. It's
this
a
is
lot
what
of
you're
it's a lot of
paid to
time.
do.
Yep.
Yeah. So for me, I think one of the things, and this kind of dovetails neatly into, I guess, like a general casting philosophy that I have.
Mhm.
But how do you convey that, right, to somebody who has never played the game before, or
Yeah.
who's entirely new to tack shooters, or um, who is a fan of, I don't know, FaZe Clan from Fortnite, and then
Mhm.
Baby Bay tweeted something out that they're playing, and now they're tuning in, right? Like, how do we bridge that gap
Yeah.
and build the community from all of these different areas and walks that may not necessarily know everything? And I think that's one of the key things is how you convey that, right, to somebody
Mhm.
who may not understand. And that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier. I think there are two big things I want to touch on here. The first one is, as a caster, my job is to complement a moment.
Yeah.
My job is never to be the moment,
Mhm.
right? Like, my job is to adequately and accurately complement what's happening on the screen.
Yeah.
Um, and obviously, there are a myriad of different ways to do that, right? Like, you can build suspense, you can build excitement, you can, like, there are so many different things you can do to really kind of like create an immersive experience for people who are super experienced in the game and who people who are very new alike, right? Like,
Mhm.
create that environment that, while we're sitting at home because of a global pandemic, you can still imagine like the tension of you being in an arena,
Yeah.
right? And it's dead silent because there's a 1v1 going into overtime or something like that, right? Like,
Yeah.
you want to be able to convey that and build that so that the viewer experiences that. I think the other thing that's key here is to kind of go back to this desire to study the game, is the rounds happen so dang fast,
Yeah, they do.
right? Like, there's no time. This is strictly Doug's opinion. Okay.
Yeah.
There's no time for like nonsense,
Mhm.
right? There's so much that happens so quickly, and it's all so important
Yeah.
that you almost have to. I think DDK put out like a medium or something on this. I think it was him that he mentioned this at one point. Like, there's so much that's going on for a caster, that you almost have to pick what you want to talk about, and you can have three, four, five insanely important things that you want to touch on, like um, trapwire locations,
Mhm.
right, and astrostar locations, and conditioning, and all of these things that you want to highlight, but you only have 10 seconds
Yeah.
because there are two people who are trying to talk about a 1 minute and 40-second round. So you
Mhm.
have to pick like what's the most important and what's the most demanding. And that's why I think in this game, again, strictly Doug's opinion, a play-by-play caster cannot not understand the game
Yeah.
at a deep level, because there's so much going on
Yeah.
that it's a disservice to your co-caster, it's a disservice to the spectators, it's a disservice to the players if all you can do is get excited about a kill feed,
Mhm.
right? Like, you have to understand the game, you have to understand macro, you
Yeah.
have to understand conditioning, you have to understand little things like, why does Omen, or well, Astra now, why do they always smoke out the front of showers on bind?
Yeah.
No matter what's happening, why do they always do that?
Yeah.
What's the point? You have to be able to convey those things because that tells the bigger story. And again, there's way too much that happens in a round for you
Yeah.
not to be able to do that, not to be able to understand it, not to be able to convey it.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I can ramble about this for a long time, but I just firmly believe that if you're a play-by-play caster and you're working on this game and you are not putting in the time to study film and to understand why,
Yeah.
not just what, but why, right?
Mhm.
Like, you may have been the one who said this. I am just for the record, I am not specifically thinking about anybody in particular when I'm going to say this. Anybody can grab a 10-second clip of an execute and break down, like they can watch it 100 times and then say what the teams are doing.
Yeah.
That's not learning anything.
Yeah.
That's not doing anything, right? You have to understand the why. And I
Mhm.
think that's where you get to the point where you can accurately build narratives and you can accurately tell stories. And then you can really do a service to what's happening for the players, right? For the countless hours of prep time that they've put into this game.
Mhm.
Like, you sell that short, and that just kind of sucks for everyone.
Yeah, it does. It does suck for everyone. I think it sucks for it's frustrating for a player or coach if they do watch and felt like the most important thing that happened was dismissed and then something that wasn't actually too relevant to the outcome of the round was highlighted. And I think it does a disservice to the game. I think the game's beauty and depth of the strategy, I mean, it's an incredibly deep and complicated game, and I think you need to do a good service of highlighting that to an audience, and you have to do a good service to the audience by teaching them, whether bluntly and very cerebrally, or more subconsciously, just letting them kind of figure it out, but putting the right breadcrumbs there. I mean, I think it's a huge responsibility that you have, and it takes a lot of work. I mean, you're putting in the work, and you have a really important responsibility for the growth of such a young game. So, I appreciate the work you put in, and I think it's harder than people think. Well, as you say it's hard for me to watch a live when I VOD review. I prefer to do it sometimes alone, even if I plan to present it, whether it's to my team or an individual I'm coaching or for a YouTube video. I always watch it, or try to always watch it myself first, because I rewatched the same round 5 times, because I need to figure out what was happening here while this was happening here, and it's just so much to track, and you have to have the ability as a caster to track all of that, try to track it all. I'm sure it's impossible to be perfect about it in real time, and then you have to make a very quick decision about all the different things you tracked, which one was actually the most important a moment in that round. It is a lot of quick thinking, and there's just no real way to get good at it other than the grind, putting in the hours.
Yeah, and I think you even said something there that I want to touch on about it really being impossible to do it perfectly. And I think you're right, right? Like, as much as I say all of those things that I've said, knowing that there's still so much work that I have to do in a number of different areas. And that's one of them, right? Like, how do I become more succinct in conveying things? As you can tell, I can talk for a long time. But how do I take a super complex concept, cram it into 5 seconds, and then put it out there in a way that's easy to understand, and then allow the co-caster to do his thing, right? And flex his muscles and what have you. So there is a lot that is still missed. And I think, while as somebody who's on the receiving end of a lot of vitriol at the beginning, as a community, we've come a long way from where we started. And when it comes to like public feedback and stuff like that, I think there's still, any of the talent that I've worked with, I feel comfortable saying this on their behalf, because I know they've said it as well, and they feel comfortable agreeing to this. Like, there's still so much that we as a talent team need to do and can do to get better, right? To make it more of a satisfying, more of a fulfilling experience for the spectators. And it's a lot of the stuff that we've talked about, like 5 things are happening at once. Which one do you touch on? The times that I do VOD review on stream, for anybody who'll hang out in the stream, you'll see it. Like, dude, it can easily take me an hour and a half to 2 hours to go through one half of a map.
Yeah.
Easy. And it's because, like, you go back and you look at it again, and then you like pause and you're like, okay, why are they doing this? Like, what are they trying to accomplish? What is it that they're going after here?
Yeah.
The game is so rich, and that's why I love it, right?
Yeah.
Because I can spend hours nerding out about little things like, why is a smoke placed here? Or, what, you name it, whatever it is. Like, there's so much depth to this game that you can study it for a lifetime
Yeah.
and still be a student, still learn something new.
Yeah. No, it is incredible. It makes for an incredibly deep and long experience trying to do a VOD review, trying to be analytical. But it took me a while to, you have to have some acceptance with how chaotic and complex the game is. I think there's so much going on that you're not always going to be perfect about choosing which moment in a round to talk about, and there's no way you're going to be perfect at capturing every single, being aware of every single important thing that happened in that round if you only get one watch through. And I think it's like going to a really nice restaurant. You're really excited. Oh, it's an expensive restaurant. You read about it. It's your birthday, and you're not going to be able to eat everything on that menu.
Right,
so just don't even stress about it. Just have fun with the amount of options. Just trust that you're going to pick the good ones, and it's going to taste good. I think even as a coach and a player, I have had to abandon perfectionism more in the last 14 months than I ever have in my life, because I've come to realize, even at the professional level, playing, coaching, there's a degree of like, what's the perfect comp? What's the perfect way to play this round with these ults available, and so on and so on. And it's like, you're not going to be able to keep it in that box. Valorant is just going to blast out of every little piece of that box. And at a certain point, this is a game where you have to accept, whether you're a caster, coach, player, more broad strokes sometimes. Like, this moment was really important. Okay, maybe you didn't play it perfect, but maybe this comp isn't the perfect comp if I sat down for 8 hours on paper right now and tried to figure out what is and cross-reference all the utility, what comp is the perfect bind comp in June 2021. I don't know, but I have a player that's really expressionate and comfortable on a certain agent, and we're just going to go with that. I think it's probably similar for casting. You got to just kind of, you have to have some acceptance that you're not gonna get it all down. And like you said, you could be a student of this game forever, and that's the fun part. Is it's gonna be forever because you're never gonna nail it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it's a really, really incredible part of Valorant that there's just too much. It's just too much going on, and sometimes you gotta just let the overload happen. You can't control your understanding sometimes. Sometimes there's just a jet dashing and spinning and throwing knives, and you might as well just scream into the microphone as a caster because nobody's brain can keep up anyway.
Right. What do? You just sit back and watch at that point.
Yeah. No, it is great. All right, well, I think this is a good place to take a little bit of a break, and then when we're back, we'll probably get into some more of kind of the process of, I'd love to learn a little bit more about the logistics of casting Valorant specifically, not just kind of what you put into being a student of the game, but really what is it like when you're in the hot seat, and some, I'd love to hear some of where you think the game's headed long term and where, casting for it is headed long term, and so forth. But yeah, let's take a quick break and we'll be back with you guys. Okay, guys, we're back. Mr. Douglas. How you doing? How was your break?
Good. Chilling. Good. Got some water.
Yep.
Freaking talked your ear off for the last 45 minutes, so I'm ready to go.
Yep. Nice. Cool off a little bit with that water. It's people, this is a thankless job doing podcasts. We're both sweating in front of lights. It's hot.
Dude, cooking, man. Yeah.
Doug's got a fan. I've got a window here. I tried opening it for the start of the podcast, and it's not garbage day, but some truck decided to sabotage my audio experience, so I shut the window. But we'll go as long as our heat tolerance can handle here. So yeah, good to have you back. Let's keep going here. I kind of wanted to ask you probably a question I should have asked at the start, but I guess if you don't mind, a quick explanation of what you would draw the line. Where would you define play-by-play versus color caster, right? This is usually there's one of each in a casting duo. Yeah, so I'd just love to hear kind of a simple term from you, because I don't want to do it, I don't want to misdefine it.
So I would define the delineation between play-by-play and color caster as the play-by-play caster. I mentioned this earlier, and I think it's probably the best way to portray it. I've never really sat down and thought about rigidity to rules, so I may word vomit here a little bit.
Yeah, no.
Um, but I think about a play-by-play caster as someone whose job is to, again, complement a moment,
Mhm.
right? The intent of the play-by-play caster is to convey emotion from a moment and make it as immersive as possible to create, again, I keep using this word, but that's the best way I think I can describe it is to convey a moment,
Yeah.
right? Like to capture a moment, to capture the essence of something that happens. And
Mhm.
um, it can be, again, anything from like when Lakia jumped down from heaven on Ascent playing against version 1
Yeah.
in that 1v2, and he just like full sends like freaking Braveheart
Yeah.
cry, and the balls that it took to make that play happen, like wanting to
Yeah.
convey that to conveying again like a 1v1 on bind
Mhm.
where it's dead silent and there are 13 seconds left and the person still has to plant the spike, and
Yeah.
they have no idea where one another are. Like, how do you convey that, right? So
Mhm.
that's the job. Before I continue to ramble more,
Yeah.
that's what I believe is to be the job of a play-by-play caster in the traditional sense.
Mhm.
And the color caster's job is to explain the why, right?
Yeah.
Like, why was that moment so special?
Mhm.
Why did that warrant that response? Or and we see this in Valorant a lot, and I think is the direction we need to continue to go, and we can talk more about that later. But why, or what do you see that's something that's about to happen,
Yeah.
right? Like, you see, you've, as an analyst or as a color caster, like, you've studied the game, you know the film, you're the subject matter expert. You see certain cues and you go, and uh Sean Garris is incredible at this.
Yeah.
I love working with him. He'll look at these things and go, Doug, this is about to happen. And then sure enough, right? Like a freaking weatherman,
Yeah.
bam, bam, that's exactly what happens.
Mhm.
So in a loose sense, yeah, the moment and then the why.
Yeah.
Before the moment, after the moment, and explaining everything in between.
Yeah. Got it. Thank you. It's a lot. It's a lot going on. It's a big role for two people, to each have, and there's a lot being shared there. And I'm curious. So I guess there's caster duos, right? And what do you
Mm.
think kind of goes into finding the right what is the trick to the right duo in a game like Valorant? What do you think makes for how do you find that?
Yeah. How do you find that? That's a good question. Um, because I've worked with a number of different folks
Yeah.
in the Valorant in my time with the Valorant. So like the most I've more recently I've casted a lot with DDK. I've
Mhm.
casted a lot with Riv. I casted
Yeah.
exclusively with him at Reykjavik, or well,
Yeah.
for Reykjavik, because we were not in Reykjavik.
Right, right.
Um, for Masters One, I casted with Sean a lot as well. I think when I think about an ideal duo, right? Removing Doug from the equation, what in my opinion defines a good duo? Trust.
Yeah.
Uh like you've got to trust one another. So a really good example of this is this. Again, I allude to this like lurking moment where a player is about to swing around the corner in a tense 1v1 and the other player's holding the angle, right? Like,
Mhm.
as the play by, or if one caster's building up to that moment and they're using inflection of voice and they're creating the suspense around the moment, and then they cut noise, right? And like just let the play happen, right?
Yeah.
Just like let it breathe, let it happen. And then something happens. There's got to be a trust there, in my opinion, on who, and this is getting very nuanced, but who picks up,
Yeah.
right? Like, who picks up from there? Where does that go? What direction do you take that in?
Mhm.
Or this is something that I have enjoyed doing with Sean a lot, and yeah, he will team me up at times. Like, if I've identified something because of film watching or whatever,
Yeah.
um, he'll team me up and say, Doug, explain this. Now, like, that may not seem like a big deal, but when you think about on camera to like 500,000 people watching at once, like there is an element of trust that has to be had there. Or if I do that to Riv or Dan or, whatever it is that I'm casting with, like where I toss up this meatball, I've got to trust that co-caster to crank it over the left field fence and nail it. And also know where I'm trying to guide that conversation, right? Because like it's a leading question. I know what I want you to say.
Yeah.
I know where I want you to go. And I've got to trust you to get there, to know where I'm trying to go, to build that narrative with me and build those like moment by moment. Cause that's what a match of Valorant is you get like these slivers, these moments, and you build them across for 25 rounds or however long it ends up being. And that's your storyline. That's your narrative. So you're building these along the way. How do you have the chemistry and how do you have the trust to be able to do that across 45 minutes, across an hour, across, however long it is? So trust, chemistry, I think is a really big one. And then those intangibles aside, I think a lot of it is putting in work, right? Like it's not sexy, but it's putting in work.
Yeah.
Prior to Reykjavik, Riv and I spent probably too much time watching film together.
Yeah.
Right. Like it was probably too much time. Going into every cast, regardless of who I'm working with, I walk into every cast with like a goal. What's my goal? What do I want to accomplish in this cast? Is it more storytelling through utility usage prior to rounds? Is it more letting moments breathe? Right. Like whatever the goal is, but I walk into it with a goal. And I expect or I ask the same out of my co-casters, like what's your goal going into it? What's your goal going into this cast? And then to wrap back around to the trust thing, I'm trusting, I'm just saying Riv again because I worked with him most recently. I'm trusting Riv to help me with my goal. So if my goal is as a play-by-play caster, we alluded to this a little bit earlier. We can talk about this a lot more now if you want to. As a play-by-play caster, I want to break the mold about how people think about play-by-play.
Yeah.
And I tell Riv that going into the cast, I trust him as my co-caster to help facilitate that. Right?
Yeah. It's a immensely hard thing, and I'm only realizing that fully right now as you're talking about it. It's similar to being a player, right? You have to have a goal. It keeps you structured. It focused. It's what is the point of what you're going to do here, and it gives some direction. And there is a ton of trust. And it sounds like a lot of fast-paced decision making, intuition, and improv, right? I mean, it's a lot of that. I'm just curious. It's kind of a simple question. You mentioned you watched a lot of film with Riv. Do you guys just cast to yourselves together, or is it more analytical? Do you both watch and kind of break down what would you say if you were casting?
I honestly, when I've done this individually, when I did it with Riv or whoever it is, it's watching like it's VOD review.
Got it. Okay. Yeah.
Now there are times where, and admittedly, I don't know if this is weird or not. So if there are other casters watching and they're like, Doug, this is weird, I don't do this. Full disclaimer, I guess I'm weird. But like I'll be watching games. If I'm casting second or third, I'll be watching the matches and I will think about what I would say in that moment.
Yeah.
Or I would cast through it by myself.
Yeah.
But I think that's a lot of how do I say this without sounding arrogant? Again, I realize where my specific weaknesses are and my growth areas are. And that's what I hone in on. So I want to be more intentional about using different words to communicate the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. So like, that's what I will focus on. That's where I'll hone in on, right? Like those specific weaknesses. So
I guess one thing you probably get out of basically VOD reviewing with whatever co-caster you're going to work with live is you figure out what common ground you have, what you create a common frame of mind around the game, right? And then you also probably understand the ways they see the game. What are the good things? What are
Mm-hmm.
they good at spotting? And then you kind of know when to tee them up. And when you're leading a question, they kind of know what you want the answer to be. It's a lot. The hardest thing about what I'm hearing compared to being a player is, well, at least when you're a player, you can get really good at talking, communicating in real time about what you want to do. And I'm always amazed at some players' abilities to. They're in a 2v1 and just like that they hear a shot, they know where the last player's. Okay, you stand here, you swing off me. I'm off my contact with this player. It's really quick. They say what they want each other to do. You don't get to verbally communicate with your coworker. You get that's not so that's so hard. I mean, that's such a I guess I don't know. I wonder maybe that's something people think about all the time. To me, it's like I guess that's obvious, but I never really thought about it like that. And it's intense. I remember seeing some tweet about two League of Legends casters that used hand signals on when they kind of interjected or wanted to kind of add a point. Is that common in casting generally, do you think? Yeah.
In studios and in LAN settings, yes.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I've missed most is from this COVID era is not being able to like touch my co-caster. Like if we're casting off the same screen, I want to point to something on the mini to draw attention to it. And there are so many like unspoken nonverbal cues that we can't share. That we would be able to in an arena or in a studio. Like if I want to say something, I tap the desk, right? Like nobody has any idea that I'm tapping the desk except my co-caster who's with me. He gets the cue that I need to say something important, which again goes back to this trust idea, right? Like if you and I are casting and you're saying something and I'm tapping the desk, you're probably, or like, I better be damn sure that it's important to be cutting you off, right? Like, and there has to be an element of trust from you to go, okay, if he's got to say something important, he needs to say something important, and it's got to be enough of a big deal to interject at this moment, which again blankets trust. But yeah, there definitely are like these little chemistry things, these like unverbal or nonverbal, not unverbal, nonverbal cues that help with stuff like that. And to go back to what you were saying earlier about watching film together, I vividly remember it was a cast with Sean at Masters 1 where we didn't watch the film together, but we talked about like key things going into the map. And again, world-class talent. He remembered one of the things that I pointed out going into the map. And in that, he identified it in the moment and said, Doug, what's happening here? He knows the answer. It's right. Like he knows what the answer to the question is, but because of the work that he and I had put in ahead of time, he tossed that up and he allowed like a bit of flex, right? And the ability for me to nerd out over something and break something down. And the only reason that was feasible was because we talked about it ahead of time and we had talked about what are key things going into the maps, and he identified that moment and we were able to capitalize on that.
Yeah. So it just emphasizes a ton of preparation and getting to know each other in the game together so that you can rely on that intuition, because no matter what this job of casting, it's you have to have a ton of intuition and trust because you can't communicate in real time in that way. And even the little things you can do, so Valorant basically, I guess, for the last year for casters, it's been hard mode, right? Like it's just been you're missing something that helps, which is being in person together, and that is really interesting to think about. That'll be fun to see the first casting where casters can be next to each other. I'm sure you're excited. When I when I was coaching and we got a coaching slot, that was like whoa, like I can look at all my players' point of views while we play the game, and I can offer each player individual feedback in the same hour instead of it was like I can actually do my job. I'm sure there's going to be some similar, just the door is fully open. I'm sure you're excited.
Oh my gosh, dude. You have no idea. And there's so much to that too, right? Like there's the ease of things like those nonverbal cues that make your job easier, right?
Yeah.
Because you're in person. There's also like the energy that you miss, and it's contagious. And even if it's just the studio,
Yeah.
right? But there's an energy to being in a studio. There's an energy to being in an arena, and I think one of the things that's been, and my hope is that for the last 14 months, or even the last 6 months since VCT started, my hope is that this has not lacked from a
Hmm.
spectator's perspective. But how do we, as on camera talent, again, how do we capture, how do we bottle up just a sliver of that excitement and that energy that you would feel in an arena,
Yeah.
and somehow try to convey that into a camera,
Yeah.
somehow try to convey that. And it's not as big a deal for traditional sports because that's the norm,
Hmm.
right? Like you get that more often than not,
That's true.
right? When you're sitting and you're watching a game, that's almost all you know.
Yeah.
But for those who have been to an arena, for those who have tasted what that's like, right? So as
Hmm.
talent, how do we again just bottle up just a tiny bit and convey that in a way that kind of captures some of that magic?
Yeah.
And that's, yeah, I just can't wait to get back. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't.
Yeah.
I can't.
It's all right. Soon enough. Soon enough. Um, it will be. It will be fun, I'm sure. And I think, for what it's worth, I think you and pretty much all the casters, in my experience at Iceland, did a very good job
Thank you.
with genuine excitement. And I felt when I was watching the games, genuinely like I was watching this big land with a lot of energy and that feeling of this is a big event. I think the hardest times are when it rolls to the analysts or shots and people's backgrounds are a little different, and then I can kind of realize, oh wait, yeah, they're probably not actually in Iceland. Or I think even at the shots of the players with very wide spread apart desks and whatnot, a little bit
Yeah.
more of an open stage is kind of like, oh yeah, this is COVID and whatnot.
Right.
But there, you can't get around those things, and they weren't.
Mhm.
I think for the most part, I felt really, at least individually, quite immersed, and I really felt the excitement, especially when the games were live. And I think, so thumbs up there from me. And you mentioned a couple times now, kind of changing the definition of play-by-play casting, and I would love to hear a little
Yep.
more of what you mean by that, whether that has to do with Valorant itself.
Mhm.
There are these kind of clear roles, play-by-play and color, but you've got probably the most experienced color caster. Sean Garrett's teeing you up to talk about the game. What do you think about? Yeah, where do you see these roles going, and how does that kind of tie into the game you happen to be working in?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this earlier, but I can get far more in depth here. Valorant is just different. It's just different, right? Like it is it is a round based game, but it carries the pace and it carries like the compact action of a respawn type game, right? Where action's constantly going on. Um and when you take something like that and you compress it so tightly, and there's so much pressure that's built into these minute and 40-second moments, um in my opinion, now I know that there are some in the talent space who may not necessarily agree with me. This is strictly Doug's opinion. You cannot have clearly defined play by play and color. And I'll paint a couple of examples here. So let's say um I'm casting with Riv. We're late into a round, and we've been we've been up until this point very disciplined about building space for one another, and I can explain what that means too, but in simple terms, or in not simple terms, in like a condensed format. I try to leave the 10 seconds prior to the round starting, and then a little bit into it for the color, right? To
Mm-hmm.
paint a picture about what's going to happen, what's going to go on. And then there's normally a little bit of early action, then there's mid round calling, and then there's a late round. And obviously, not every round contains all of those things, but um, generally speaking, they follow a certain cadence. And let's say that for the majority of the rounds up until this point, that's kind of like the formula that we followed.
Yeah.
And then let's say that we're late into a round, we're following this formula, and Riv is in the middle of breaking down like a pretty complex concept, right? Now, mind you, again, that means in this context, you're doing it in like 10 seconds, right? You don't really have a ton of time, but you're in the middle of something, and then the play blows up.
Yeah.
Right. And it blows up in a way where, for whatever reason, it's not feasible. And again, like, all you have to do is watch a couple of games to understand exactly the moments that I'm talking about, because they happen more often than you would think. Not you specifically, but it's not feasible for him to drop it quickly and throw it to me as the play-by-play caster to pick up in the excitement of the moment. That's where the color has to be able to flex a little bit.
Yeah.
In my opinion, you have to be able to complement that moment in an effective way, and in an adequate way. And I say that these molds have to change because that's not the norm, right? Like, there are other games where there's more time built in, and you have enough wiggle room to be. There's just more safety. There's more of a safety net to be able to throw to somebody when you feel something about to happen, right? That's not always the case in Valorant, and you can have like the opposite. And I know I mentioned some of this earlier, but the game's just too dang complex to leave all of the knowledge, to leave all of the analytical building to one person.
Yeah,
it's too complex, and there's just not enough time, right? Like, imagine with this game as complex as it is, and in my opinion, in order to do the service that it demands from a complex analytical perspective with two people, if you really wanted to focus on that, which again, you should, and you had these clearly defined roles, dude, your color caster's talking the entire time.
Yeah.
Play-by-play is not doing anything. And in the same light, you can easily flip the coin and go, well, it happens so quickly and it's so exciting. Play-by-play is going to talk the whole time, and color's not going to say anything. Right. So you start to feel these molds that we have traditionally built for roles, and you feel them kind of start to blur. You're like, wait a second, play-by-play has to color a little bit because there's too much going on. Right. And if you're talking at any point in the minute, 40 seconds, and it's not substance, it's not with substance, then you're wasting time, honestly. Again, just my opinion. So you have to be able to color a little bit. And then it goes the other way too. The color has to be able to flex and adequately complement a moment and build a moment, because you never know when it's going to drop hot on your lap, and you just got to take it. These roles, again, it's the pace of the game and the complexity of the game. Valorant is built in such a way, in my opinion, that those rigid roles can't exist, right? I won't say names, but there's a story that I heard about a very decorated CS caster, play-by-play caster, who just wouldn't watch the games. And dude, one of the best, right? Like one of the best. I don't think you can do that in Valorant. I don't think you can. And maybe other people can, but I just think that the game's just too rich, man. It's too deep for a casting pair not to be able to flex a little bit and do both. Now, I don't think that it needs to be able to be a 50-50, right? Like, I don't expect Sean to play-by-play at and color as equally as I am, and have those roles equally divided.
Totally.
But I just think you have to be able to flex. You have to be able to do both.
Yeah. That makes complete sense. Casting in Valorant is uniquely very demanding in terms of the ability to flex, the adaptability really on the fly, and to wear a lot of hats and pass them back and forth just at such a rapid and trusting and intuitive way. I mean, it's incredible to me that, first of all, well said. That was really just interesting stuff I hadn't quite thought about. Like, it is really, that was a really cool point, that you're sitting there and you're trying to break down, and they'll probably do this with this ability, and you can see they're setting up for this, and then suddenly Astral Wall's dropping down, or an Omen's teleporting, and there's just this crazy thing happening, and you have to go, oh, okay, never mind. And it would be awkward if every time that happened, you just got the play-by-play caster's voice back in, because you're right. The color caster's in the middle of talking; they have to carry it onward. You could take everything you just said and pretty much apply it to playing too. I mean, these are you have to be really adaptable. You have to suddenly switch the role you're in based on the situation, suddenly and unpredictably happening. You have to be able to flex. I mean, I've said that in episodes about players being able to flex agents, and that's just incredible to me that you're talking about casters and what it takes to be a successful caster, successful duo in Valorant, what unique things about this game create unique demands for you and your role and your job. And it's just incredible to me that they're so similar to what is asked of players. I don't know. I can't find the words to say why that's incredible to me, but I think it says something about this game that it's asking this creativity, this adaptability, this kind of, you need this intuition on a player and a caster level. And it's for the same core reasons, I think, in terms of the game's design.
Well, and so I want to, because just to clarify, if anyone's listening and they're like, Doug, that's not true, you can what have you. The point that I wanted to make on those moments, for comfortable duos, for proven decorated talent, right? Like you can see something like or even just an audio cue, right? Like as a color caster, you can be breaking something down and then you can hear the audio cue of the showstopper and then go, oh, and here comes the showstopper. And then that's the cue. Like that's where play-by-play picks up. And a lot of times that's how it plays out, right? Like the color caster's breaking something. There's that one hint. It's a split-second cue, and then bam, it's dropped. Play-by-play picks it up, goes off, does this thing, and then it comes back. But that's not always feasible.
Yeah, you have to be ready for it to fall apart.
You have to. So like for anyone who may be listening and going, that's not true. Like, listen to blah blah blah. I'm not saying that it's always that way. What I am saying is that as a color caster, you have to be prepared for that, because 8 times out of 10, yes, you'll drop it in a smooth transition, play-by-play will pick it up and, carry it off to Gloryland. But that's not always the case. Yeah. You have to be able to do both.
Yeah. 1 or 2 times out of 10, you have to be able to do the other thing. And you don't know which of the 10 times are going to be the ones that, and I think that's really the biggest part of that challenge. Well, awesome. That was really interesting. I mean, I feel like I have learned a ton in the last hour or so here, and it's been fun. A lot of my experience with these episodes so far has been learning a lot, but really teeing people up to hear their perspectives on things that I have my own perspectives on. This was just a ton of, just straight up newness for me. I mean, I didn't, I wanted you on because I know how much you put into casting Valorant. I think it's clear that you've worked really hard and really made it in a year with this game. No, of course it's deserved. And I think, I know there's much more going on, but I have no understanding of it. I really wanted to shed light on it, not only for other people, but for myself. And I think, it's really great to hear how much you're putting in and what goes into it. I think it's a really young game. A lot of stuff is really not defined yet. There's a lot of careers to be made. You're really trailblazing it, and it's just been a treat, Doug. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I think my hope is that there's like a genuine love for the game that comes across when I cast, because I think at the end of the day, dude, like we mentioned how we're both pretty bad at this, but you have to take a step back and go, dude, you're casting a video game.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so number one, loosen up a little, right? It's a video game. But then also take your job very seriously and understand that there are many people who want to be doing that.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not something to be taken lightly, and it's not something to be taken for granted. And the crazy thing is, like, I don't know when this ends.
Yeah.
I could never get called back to cast. Right? Like that can happen, right? It can happen. It does happen.
Yeah.
So my hope is that I'm able to convey that, and that just kind of like organically comes out. Like that's the outpouring, the very natural like overflow of a love for a game, right? That I can nerd out at, that I can be my goofy, casual, stupidly grinning self on camera.
Yeah.
For who knows how many people are watching.
I think you do a very incredible job at it. I think you really do convey your love for the game. I think we both talked about how you just have to, nobody's going to open the door for you. You just got to kick down the whole wall and make your way in a game like this. And it takes a ton of work and a ton of time. And there's this thought process that I have, I'm sure you can relate to, where you look back and you think, why do I do this? Why? It's unstable ground. My career could disappear at any time. It's a ton of work. It's really exhausting. Why do I do it? And then I realize, I only could have put so much time in if I really loved the game. And then you kind of go, why do I? Yep. Oh, that's why I do it, because I really love the game. And I think, it's you clearly put a lot of work in, and your love for Valorant is obvious, because you wouldn't have been able to put that much work in if you didn't love the game, really. Yep. And that's the end of it, I think. The root of it, and something I really take pride in as somebody who kind of built my roots in this game, and something I really feel kindred with you about, and I really wanted to have you on. I like, not to say that people who come from other games don't have the same love, but when you have somebody who made it in Valorant, you know that they love this game, because they just wouldn't have made it otherwise. I think it's true for everybody who's hanging out in professional Valorant. There's a very shared love for the game. It's very obvious that you have it. If your goal is to convey it, trust me, you are good. Give your imposter syndrome a break. Go have a whiskey after this. Enjoy yourself. Yeah, thank you, Doug. Thank you for coming on. We'll have to do it again soon. Any last words? Any shout outs? I've already got your Twitter here at the bottom, but other than that,
no, again, thank you for having me. Seriously, this was a long time coming. I know we DM'd about it a couple times, and I'm glad it finally worked out. So thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you, Doug. I'm sure we'll see you casting some very big Valorant games very soon. Hopefully my team's in them. All right, thanks, Doug. It's been a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your night, and thank you, viewers.